YouTube? It's your girl Kristen here, aka Black Cherry, coming at you again with another review. Um, I've been bored lately, so as most bored people do, we get on to Netflix and binge whatever show that we could possibly find. And I wanted to talk about something that, well, quintessentially has the whole world talking for the past 8 weeks or so. Insert Squid Game. So, sorry about that. That was my dog. So again, trying to talk about Squid Game here. If you haven't heard of Squid Game, I can only assume that you live under a rock somewhere, especially with the consistent amount of memes that have been popping up on either your timeline, if you have social media, the constant deluge of just food channels making honeycomb for the past 6 weeks. Even in Halloween, people were dressing up with these red and green jumpsuits for some reason. Even at work, there was that always the question. It was either did you watch Squid Game? And I'm just like, what is Squid Game? Well, I know now. So, to that question, what is Squid Game? Mean by that? According to Netflix, it has over 111 million accounts viewed that series since. I don't know how accurate that is. That might have fudged the numbers a little bit, but it's not impossible. It's been number one on Netflix in about 94 countries. First ever Korean show in the US actually hit number one, which I'm not sure it was a feat for the US itself because there are a lot of Korean drama shows that I think would be quite popular here. 91% on Rotten Tomatoes, and consistently so. It hasn't dropped since. Okay, the general synopsis of Squid Game is a down on his luck man, struggling financially and morally so, gets picked, in a sense, to play children's game along with 455 other financially bankrupt and people to win a prize that could quintessentially solve all their debt problems and then some. That's the general synopsis of it. To each its own. It's not something that hasn't been done before. However, this series in particular definitely captured the world in some sense. So, um, so I kind of just want to get just general things out the way before I actually go on to my regular tangent of Squid Game. So here I go. Gi-hyun is a shitty individual. I don't care what you think. That practical plot armor, I won't say plot armor, that main character armor is really thick with this one because quite honestly, he's an annoying person. Definitely someone that if you probably talk to in real life, he might be considered a punchable person. Song-woo, he's not the villain. He's not the main villain. He just played the game better than anyone else. I don't care what anyone says. I'm not saying that it wasn't fucked up. I'm just saying I get it, if that makes a sense. R.I.P. Ali, but quite honestly, you knew he was gonna die anyway. Sorry for the spoiler. It was gonna happen. Just too nice. And if you haven't seen it, you understand why. Saebyuk is gorgeous, obviously. I don't think people realize that she was actually a model before she was casted for Squid Game. So if you were wondering how the heck did she get on there, well, that's why. Ji Young is the underrated character. If you don't know who that is, that's this lady right here. Underrated, I don't care what anyone says. And Ilnam, looking back on it, we probably should have caught that. We should have caught on a little bit sooner that something was up with Ilnam in the first place. But I won't go into any details. Anyway, those are just general things, maybe some hot takes. I'm not here to talk about that. I just wanted to talk about the series in general. Okay, so with my thoughts being cleared and put out the way, I actually just wanted to talk about the series itself. So after watching it, I thoroughly enjoyed the experience. Definitely something that I particularly would watch as someone who likes gore and horror and just general psychological thrillers and all that nature. It caught my attention. I binged the show in 3 days, give or take. But I was left feeling kind of confused. Confused at the end. And it wasn't necessarily the ending itself, although that definitely caused me some confusion. Like, Songwoo, what the hell? But I was confused of the series. Why did it garnish all this hoopla? Like, how did it become this viral phenomenon? Now, keep in mind, nothing can really tell you what will and what won't go viral, but this story itself in Squid Game, like I said, has been done before. Definitely not the first of its kind. Just, like, if you think about it, works like The Hunger Games, even though that's not a series, it's a book series, and they did have several movies made off of it, but it's a game, survival game, and you win some sort of prize at the end. Truth or Dare, if you haven't seen that horror movie, The Escape Room, Battle Royale. All these works kind of go along these lines of playing a game all to survive and then win something at the end. Hell, I even think some anime actually go do this trope as well. If you think about Netflix original Darwin's Game, I don't recommend. Maybe Kakegurui, even though no one dies in there, it's still essentially a game and you win something at the end, and what you're surviving may not be physical, but social and mental and all that good stuff. I wouldn't consider Sword Art Online or Gaunt's O, but again, game, survival, some sort of grand prize at the end, if you understand that. So what makes Squid Game any different from any of those games or shows, movies, series? What's the difference? Um, well, what you could consider is the storytelling. Phenomenal actors all the way around. You definitely were captivated by each of the characters. They weren't just two-dimensional. Definitely layered. In a short time, you were able to build some sort of connection with them, and definitely have an emotional attachment, especially when said character, quote unquote, loses the game. So I believe the director did a great job at bringing stories of different backgrounds together, and layering them in a way that kept the audience captivated. Even if you hated him, I don't care what anyone says, Song-woo is bae. And despite his story being not as sort of heart-wrenching as the others, it's still something that could be quite relatable, um, especially for like high-powered businessmen that end up losing their way somehow. Second thing that I would think possibly could make this series a little more easier to follow is the fact that it does use children's game. Uh, you wouldn't think that, but essentially, when you start using children's games, they're simple, unique. Everyone remembers how to play red light, green light. Everyone used to play marbles at some point. You knew what tug of war was. These were games that you played as a kid, and that essentially helped develop some sort of connection or build some sort of teamwork in a way. So, what does that do in the series? Well, it left you not having to try to figure out the game itself. Instead, you could focus on the things surrounding the game. So, the dire stakes of when you lose, you die, the emotional baggage that goes on with the games when you have to choose how you want to win, knowing very well that the team that you're against or the opponent that you're against is going to die, essentially. You're left with that, what left free to think about that more moral turmoil and project yourself onto the characters and imagine yourself in that way instead of worrying about how to actually play the game. For example, like chess is relatively medium hard game. No one generally cares how to play chess, mental chess in that sense. I'm not saying that no one doesn't. It's just that it's hard to follow in a game, in a series where it requires a little bit more thinking than that. Uh, children's game make it a little bit children's games makes it a little bit more easier to follow in that sense. And also there's sort of a sinister aspect, especially like when you used to play children's games, there was definitely a little bit more of relation to happier times back then when you weren't thinking about work and paying taxes and all these adult stuff. So the fact that you mix children's game with the possibility of you dying, there's something a little bit more sinister, a little more eerie about that. Okay, so where was I? Like I said, the second point that I would like to bring up is the fact that the times that we're in. The COVID-19 back pandemic back in 2020 was certainly a rough one for everyone. Some people actually were more affected than others, and this caused quite a bit of strife, not only in just like our social aspects of lives, but also economically. There was a lot of loss with jobs, a lot of uncertainty within the market in general. And this definitely gave off some feelings of despair, even maybe even some um, feelings of just nihilism, quite honestly. Um, and people were taking it tough. And I'm just wondering if this series kind of like speaks towards that. For instance, I'm saying, just in those dire circumstances, would you say no to a game like this? Uh, I mean, morally speaking, I hope you would. But when it comes down to it, if you feel like you have nothing to go back to and nothing to look forward to, like what are your options? And I feel like this sort of series kind of spoke to that kind of desperation, that kind of feeling of what else can I do type atmosphere. So that could be a reason for it. Definitely it came out in the right time. You would think that it would be a bunch of zombie movies that might inspire more of watch, but like I said, you can't tell what goes viral and what doesn't go viral. My next point would be just that this series, and I'm speaking across to the director himself, the creator of Squid Game, this series is an allegory towards capitalism and the issues that capitalism holds in society in general. So if you haven't paid attention into your government classes or economics classes, capitalism is basically a system in which it is production and consumption of things are privately owned. So you would get all the profit and also have control of the products being made. There's very little government intervention that goes on in that aspect. So capitalism is like very little government involvement when it comes to consumer production and things of that nature. Pros, if you think about the pros of capitalism, I don't really think this series actually emphasized that. Competition, keeping prices low as long as you are aware and there are checks and balances in place to stop monopolies. You're allowed to create and build up your wealth and possessions. And the consumers choose what is desired. Now that I say that, I actually think that the series does kind of touch on those. So, in the beginning of Squid Game, or not necessarily the beginning of Squid Game, when the contestants are playing these games, they have a choice. They have a choice to continue or not to continue. Kind of bringing air to the point where the consumers kind of have a desire and they have the choice to choose what products they want. These contestants had a choice to continue the game or stop the game. However, what they don't tell you is that even though they have quote unquote a choice, there really isn't much of a choice for them. Like I said in the beginning, these people don't have a lot to their name. They are in dire straits here. A lot of debt. Some could possibly even face jail time, lose their homes, lose their businesses, all of that. And so it's when going back, because they actually did decide to not play the game and they went back to their lives and they realized that the hell there was worse than the hell that they were facing in the game. It's more like I would rather choose my death and do it quickly rather than a slow, painful death in which I have no money, I'm uncomfortable, and I'm potentially just withering away while everyone else is moving on about in their lives. I would say capitalism does very much focus on the individual, not necessarily like social. I wouldn't say social, not necessarily the greater good for like everyone, but the individual. This, even in itself, is very selfish. But it could come off as sort of like, you have yours and I have mine's type thing, and people do think like that. So that's one aspect that the game kind of points out. It also does a very great job of kind of like pointing out what people actually want. So in the games, they always say that it's supposed to be equal. Everyone has a chance to win said games or the opportunity to do so. The problem is that I don't think in some other YouTubes and some other actually like journalistic readings, they actually say that the games in Squid Game weren't equal at all. I would disagree. I think the games in Squid Game were equal, but it was equality within the games, but there wasn't equity. So if I were to describe equity, well, let me first describe equality. For example, let's say that there is a tall fence. You have one tall person and one short person. The tall person can see over the fence and see whatever's going on beyond that fence. Let's say there's a game or something. The short person isn't as tall and can't see over said fence. They're both on equal leveling as far as the ground goes. The height of the fence is the same goes, but one has more of an advantage over the other. If you're basing it off equality, they both have equal opportunity to see the game. It's just one has a bit more of an advantage due to things that are beyond their control, like genetics, age, height, whatever. You can't control those things. Equity would be if there were a set of boxes that the short person can stand upon and be equal leveling to the tall person, and now they both can see over the fence and see whatever is going on over there. That is equity. I believe in Squid Game, there is no equity. Everyone has the opportunity to, say, win the game. And with that comes using your own devices and your own intellect to move and progress through the game successfully. Song-woo did this perfectly. Very intellectual man. He used his cunningness, deviousness, I would say, but overall intellect to move through the game and get to the final spot, which is why I don't understand why he had to kill himself, but that's another part of something that I can talk about later. Like I said, main character armor is thick with Gi-hyun. But Sung-woo did this perfectly, using what he knew and the information that he knew to progress through the game efficiently. Essentially, capitalism does do this as well in just normal society. Whereas people say that you have equal opportunity, but again, some people have better access to said opportunities and better, more frequency to said opportunities than others based on like your background, the skills that you have, and everything ties into that. And there's like you could probably go on a 30-minute long tangent about the disparities between people based on where you live, skills, ageism, sexism, all that great stuff. It plays a part, and you can kind of see that a little bit in Squid Game too, as you see there was more of a disparity between like men and women. There was definitely more men playing in the game than women, and quite frankly, nobody wanted to. When it came to like team games, nobody really wanted to have females on their team because they're considered the weaker sex and advantageous and disadvantage to the team in that sense. So there was a little bit of everything in Squid Game. You could definitely find parallels, call tos, or even just in your own society. And I think that's what actually pushed Squid Game to just the epitome of just equalness, the epitome of popularity that it's garnished, just how relatable that it could be, um, for some characters, and how you can actually find uh, sort of similar relations, similar call to similar life hacks within it, if that makes sense. That doesn't make sense. But what I'm saying is that you can relate to some of the issues in Squid Game, regardless of it being a little bit more gory, a little more sadistic. But then again, what is capitalism? I think that's what actually kind of pushed it over to the edge. Now, I would like to just call out though that again this is a Korean drama, so a lot of things that were more aligned with like the Korean culture showed more, and they were a little bit lost in translation from Korean to English. I think people have pointed that out, especially Korean speakers have pointed out that with the English dub, it didn't carry some of the same weight that it would in Korean, but it definitely got through to people. It was something that, regardless of what language you speak, you can kind of attest to. You can find a relative connection with some of the issues going on, especially just being in debt, struggling to make a living, trying to get over that hump of just despair. And, what do you do with that? Uh, there's like relations to like the housing market in Korea and just social constructs, which even though Korean, again, it's just a world thing that most of us can relate to. So, I mean, those are mostly the talking points that I could gather from Squid Game. Now, does it completely explain just the virality of it all? Just how it just moved from here to here, and now we're working on Squid Game season 2, which it is coming out. Not fast enough for most people, but it is. And just where it's gonna go. I'm actually kind of excited to see how it goes. I mean, I was definitely dissatisfied with the ending, and I'm kind of curious to see how it's going to continue from there, because most of your favorite characters that you liked are gone. Technically, it's only Gi Hyun left with his ugly ass red hair. But maybe that's a symbolism to something, and I'm not privy to it. So, regardless of the small spoilers that I did give in Squid Game, for one, I'm not sure if I'm actually sorry, because either you watch it, you watch it. If you don't, then you don't. You probably wouldn't care if it was spoiled for you anyway. I will say though that nothing can compare to actually viewing it yourself. If you can stomach a little emotional distress and gory, because I'm telling you, episode 6 broke me. And I don't even cry. I shed a little tear though during that episode. But I digress. Watch Squid Game for yourself. Tell me what you like about it. If you also are confused at the virality of it, and if you plan on following the crowd and also ranting and raving about it, I will talk to y'all later with my next review. I'd probably do something a little bit more simpler, maybe a movie or so, because I can definitely get into more details and just dissertation. I don't want a dissertation on anything, but comments on those. It's a bit harder to do series, especially when uh, it's garnished so much popularity and there's so much to talk about. My phone doesn't have that kind of space for me, so we have that. I'm gonna stop rambling now. Talk to y'all later. Bye.